My fire went out while I was still staring at it. Not slowly, not naturally. 1 second the flames were standing straight and bright. The next second, they folded inward, collapsed, like something had pressed down on them. No wind, no snow falling, just silence. I was 3 miles into Pike National Forest, winterside, where the trees grow too tight together and the sun disappears early. The kind of place where sound doesn't travel the way it should. I hadn't planned to camp that deep, but I followed what looked like an old service trail, and it kept going and going. By the time I realized I didn't recognize any of the terrain anymore, daylight was already thinning out. So I made camp. Not perfect, not pretty, just enough. A fire ring made of loose stone, tent wedged between 2 fir trees, backpack hanging from a branch. The forest around me didn't feel empty. It felt paused, like a room after someone finishes speaking, but before anyone else answers. I tried to ignore that. I ate, warmed my hands, and watched the flames. That's when they died, instantly. No sparks, no smoke, just gone. I waited for the sound of wind. Nothing. I relit it. The second fire stayed alive, but it burned strangely, low, dense, and colorless, like it didn't want to be seen. That was the first time I noticed the footprints. They were not mine. They didn't approach my camp. They didn't leave my camp. They formed a loose circle around it, wide, careful, almost polite. I stood up slowly, looked into the trees. Nothing moved. No animals, no birds, no snow slipping from branches, just the soft, ticking sound of the fire. I packed my food back into my bag and zipped my tent. Not because I was scared, because the forest felt observant. I woke up just after midnight. Not suddenly, not in panic, just awake. The air inside the tent was colder than it should have been. The kind of cold that feels clean and sharp, like it came from somewhere deeper than the weather. I rolled onto my side. That's when I noticed the second campsite. It wasn't there before. 10 or 12 yards away, between 2 snow-heavy pines. A fire ring, a dark shape that might have been a tent, and something long lying on the ground. I unzipped my tent just enough to look. My breath didn't fog. The second campsite looked old, older than mine. The stones were worn flat. The logs around it were smooth like they'd been sat on for years. But the snow on everything was fresh, perfect, like it had all been waiting under it. I didn't leave my tent. I didn't turn on my headlamp. I didn't blink, because there were no tracks leading to it, and none leading away. It had simply appeared. Morning light didn't make it better. It made it worse. I walked over carefully, boots sinking deep. My prints were loud, sharp, ugly. The second campsite didn't react. Inside the fire ring was ash, cold, powder fine, too fine. There was a sleeping bag on the ground, unzipped, flat. No moisture inside, no debris, like it had never been used. A pair of gloves sat on a log, palms up, and beside them, a notebook. I opened it. The first page read, Day 1, found the quiet place. Feels safer here. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Page 2, Day 2. Fire doesn't behave the same here, but I sleep better. Page 3, Day 3. Something moves when I'm not looking directly at it. Page 4, Day 4. I hear myself walking at night. Page 5 was blank. Page 6 had one sentence written very slowly. It can use what it watches. I shut the notebook. My stomach had gone hollow, because the handwriting was identical to mine. Same pressure, same slant, same tiny break in the letter T. I packed up, not rushed, not panicked, but fast. I followed what I thought was the trail out. It wasn't. It kept bending in ways it hadn't before. The trees grew closer. The sky stayed dull and flat. And then I saw my tent, still standing, with my fire ring, in the same clearing. I hadn't moved. I had walked in a perfect, invisible loop. The second campsite was still there, closer now. That night I stayed awake, not listening, watching. The forest did something subtle. It rearranged itself. Branches that were separate in the evening leaned together. Snow on some trunks slid down, revealing darker bark underneath. The second campsite shifted, not dramatically, just enough that I could tell it was nearer. The notebook was now resting on top of its sleeping bag. Open, blank page, waiting. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I left everything behind and followed the creek downhill. Didn't stop, didn't look back. By late afternoon, I hit a service road. By sunset, I hit my car. I drove home shaking. 3 days later, I found a pair of gloves on my back porch. Palms up, clean, dry. And inside my jacket pocket, a notebook I never owned. The first page read, Day 1. Found the quiet place. Feels safer here. Something was standing where my footprints ended. Not on them, not beside them. Directly over the last place my boots had touched the trail. It hadn't left tracks of its own. I stopped walking. The snow ahead of me was smooth again, like my steps had been erased. This was supposed to be a simple overnight trip. One night, light pack, in and out. Mount Hood National Forest, Oregon. Near the eastern slope, quiet, empty in winter. My name is Daniel Mercer. I signed the trail register that morning. I remember the pen freezing halfway through my last name. Nobody else had signed in after me. That mattered later. I made camp near a bend in the creek, where the ice had cracked into slow, dark ribbons. The trees leaned inward, tall and thin, like they were trying to overhear each other. I didn't like the way the snow behaved. It didn't drift naturally. It lay too flat, like it had been pressed into place. I brushed off a fallen log to sit. Under the snow was bark that looked sanded smooth, too smooth. I scraped at it. Something was carved underneath. 3 shallow grooves. Not letters, not symbols, just 3 long marks, side by side. I ignored them. That was my mistake. By late afternoon, thin fog slid between the trunks. Not thick, just enough to soften distance. Sounds didn't echo the way they should. Even my steps felt like they were landing inside padding. I walked down to the creek to fill my bottle. When I came back, something had changed. My tent door was facing the wrong direction. I hadn't moved it. The zipper pull was warm, not from the sun, from contact. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't need to. The woods had already responded. After sunset, my fire burned sideways, not from wind. It leaned in one direction, consistently, like it was being pulled, toward the trees, toward something deeper than my camp. I kept my head down. A strange ticking sound started around then, not from a watch, not from metal, from the snow. Every few seconds, a soft, deliberate tap came from somewhere different around my camp. Not in rhythm, not random, like someone testing distances. I went into my tent early. The inside smelled wrong. Not mold, not damp, old paper, like an abandoned library. I lay still, listening to the fabric shift as the temperature dropped. Around midnight, I noticed something on the inside wall of the tent. Faint dark lines. Not wet, not frost. Words, written from the outside. I didn't read them at first. I didn't want to. But my eyes adjusted, and my stomach dropped. Daniel Mercer. Perfect spacing. Careful lettering. Under it, this place keeps what it is given. My hands were shaking. I stayed inside until dawn. Morning showed no tracks, no prints, no disturbance. Just my camp, normal, quiet. I packed up fast. As I stepped onto the trail, I noticed something new. The snow beside the path had been smoothed into a long rectangle, flat, clean, like a bed. At the head of it, 3 shallow grooves, the same ones I'd seen carved into the log. I left, didn't stop, didn't turn around. The trail register was still there when I reached the lot. I flipped it open. My name was already signed in again, under my own. Same handwriting, same frozen pen marks, but this time, the date was tomorrow.